Welcome to Tech Notice. This is going to be an interesting one because everybody wants to be like the Apple MacBook Air, and we have the most competition in this area than we've ever had before. In fact, we've got the new competition from Geekom. This is their X14 Pro laptop, brand new, and if you're familiar with Geekom, they've done lots of mini PCs before. And usually when we see a company come out with a new laptop, they're not particularly impressive. This guy here, 14-inch, 120Hz OLED, that's 2.8K. Really good design of it, and there's a lot more to like about it. In fact, the first impressions of this are so interesting and so impressive that I thought, I'm gonna get all the competition out and we really gotta put all of these head to head to see which is the best. We're gonna be looking at performance, battery life, what's inside, speakers, everything you can think of about a thin and light carry laptop, and then see which one you should get. By the way, thank you very much guys for watching these videos. Hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more of these videos, and like the video, it actually makes a huge difference. But first of all, we're going to be looking at the design, which will be familiar on the MacBooks that you've seen before. Firstly, what I have here is the M1 MacBook Air. So this is from 2020. I want to know if this can compare with this one and how does it hold up. This is an M3 MacBook Air, but this is a 15-inch version. And then on this side, we have the Asus ZenBook A14, which is also very, very interesting, thin and light, super portable, and OLED screen as well, but there's more to it, which we're gonna have to take a look at. If you wanna see any of the reviews of the other laptops on the channel, feel free to check out, but I wanna really focus here on this video of this Geekom X14 Pro. By the way, if you wanna check out any of these, I'm gonna leave the link in the description below where you can buy any of these. I'm gonna reveal the pricing later on, but if you can't keep yourself, till the end of the video, you can see the pricing in the video description below already. This Geekom, in terms of design, they've nailed it. I think sometimes you come up with a first design laptop and it's a bit of an iffy one. This is amazing. You've gone with the silver color, that looks really nice. You've got this kind of a chrome different color Geekom. There's no logo on it, which kind of makes sense because when you releasing a new first laptop, you want your name to be there because maybe not everybody's familiar with your logo. This is very, very light as well. Compared to any of the MacBooks, even this MacBook M1 that is 13-inch, it's a lot heavier than this one. But at the same time, it does not feel cheap because if I'm picking up this Asus ZenBook A14, this actually feels cheap. It does feel kind of different. It's got this cold feel. They say that they used metal in this magnesium alloy or something like that. And another thing is that fingerprints are not a very big thing. It looks very, very clean in here. I haven't cleaned it. I've shot all the B-roll and everything with it. Interesting thing to also mention is to talk about the ports. So on the right side, we have USB Type A, which is 5 gigabits in speed, headphone and mic combo jack, and then a physical switch to turn off your webcam. On the left side, we've got HDMI 2.0 and then 2 USB-C ports that are USB 4. Now that is not all, because Geekom actually for free in the package includes this little dongle that gives you extra ports. So this is a USB-C on one side that goes to the PC, and then we've got power delivery on that side. So you're not gonna lose your power delivery if you need to charge still. You can still use it through here. Another HDMI, 2 USB Type A ports, 5 gigabits per second, and a LAN port as well. This puts the actual ports above all the rest of the competition straight away. Because in terms of the ports, they're exactly the same as on the ZenBook A14, but then the MacBooks only have headphone mic combo jack and then 2 USB ports. On the sides, obviously the new M3 model that I have in here has the MagSafe as well for extra charging, but you don't have HDMI, whereas you have them on the Windows side of things, and Geekom takes this dongle to a whole other level of ports. So let's talk about the specs on all of these here. On the left side, we've got an M1 MacBook Air, 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of SSD. We've got an M3 MacBook Air in here, 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigabytes of SSD. Now this Geekom is running Intel Core Ultra 9 185H. It's got 32 gigs of DDR5, which is running at 7,467 megatransfers per second. So it is soldered onto the board. It's got 2 terabytes of SSD and is running the integrated Intel Arc GPU. On the ZenBook A14, we're running the Snapdragon X126-100 CPU, which has 8 cores and 8 threads. Then also included GPU, Qualcomm Adreno GPU that comes with this. It's got only 16 gigabytes of DDR5, but the DDR5 is running at 8,448 megatransfers per second. In terms of sign in on all of these laptops, the interesting thing is on both of the MacBook Airs, you've got a fingerprint reader and password in terms of security. The Geekom also has a fingerprint reader right on the top right corner in there. The ZenBook doesn't have a fingerprint reader, but has a Windows Hello, so this is a face sign in. Okay, let's talk about the displays. Now, both of the Macs have a Retina display, but they are an IPS panel. These two on Windows side have an OLED panel. Now, all of these have been put into max brightness right now. And then just looking at all of these three, we can see that there is a bit of a difference between the OLED and IPS, especially the blacks around here on the edges of the screen. I can see that the MacBooks, because of its IPS, they have to push some light through the black bar as well, but these OLEDs are completely black. In terms of brightness, we can see that the Geekom screen is the brightest. That goes roughly around to 450 nits. And I can see that the contrast between these two, well, all of the laptops, really this is the best screen. The ZenBook A14 though, this has only a 1080p OLED display, which is not very impressive at all. This here Geekom, 2.8K OLED display. So in terms of content, that is absolutely the best. So if I'm looking at the shadows in there where it's completely dark, that was weird purple tint on the MacBooks, whereas on the OLED, it was really nicely black. Now, neither of these displays is 10-bit. All of them are 8-bit displays. And I'm just looking at the content. It does look the nicest on the Geekom actually. Yeah, I'm just wondering what's going on with the Geekom, because the highlights and the shadows, both of them feel a bit more crushed on the Geekom display compared to the IPS on MacBooks, for example. Like I can see that this highlight there is a lot more harsh compared to this one. It is brighter, but it's more crushed, and so are the shadows. I can see a lot more into that bit over there compared to the Geekom just in there. The shadows is just not there. Even the highlights a lot more brighter and sharper in there. Another thing to mention is all of the other laptops apart from Geekom are 60 Hz. The Geekom display is 120 Hz OLED, which is seriously impressive. Just when you're looking at it, it looks fantastic because you've got this glossy panel, the OLED looks sharp, colors are bright and amazing. It looks fresh and new. Next off, the webcam test. So on the left side here, what I'm looking at right now, this is the MacBook Air M3, and what you're seeing and hearing is the MacBook Air M3. This over here is the Geekom. This is what the webcam looks like and sounds like. By the way, let me know in the comment section below which one sounds the best. And then finally, on this side, we have the Asus ZenBook A14. And let me know, how does this look or sound? And now you can see all of them together. Obviously, the framing is not exactly the same, but let me know which one looks and sounds the best. Which one would you prefer out of all of them?
So, on the left side here, what I'm looking at right now, this is the MacBook Air M3, and what you see here is the MacBook Air M3. This is the MacBook
Air M1, and what you see in here is the MacBook Air M1. This over here is the Geekom. Next, we're going to test the speakers, and firstly, we're going to put the Geekom and the ZenBook side by side, and let's see which one is better. This is Geekom. Very interestingly, I think the sound is very, very similar on both of them. And to be honest, on a laptop like this, I didn't expect them to be very, very good, but they have paired up with the DTSX, which actually seems very, very good and impressive compared to the ZenBook. Now, I think the ZenBook has slightly better lows, but then the mids and highs are better on the Geekom. And it's really hard to say which one sounds better in here. Let's try now the Geekom and MacBook Air. Okay, MacBook Air is a clear winner over here. There's no competition really. MacBook speakers are a lot better. At this point, every single one of those laptops has been charged to 100%. So I'm gonna take all of the chargers off. And while we're talking about the chargers, there's some impressive things that Geekom is doing with this. Let me show you this. So firstly, with the MacBook, you're gonna get a charger just like this. This is the M3 MacBook charger, and this is 70 watts, and it's this big, just for comparison. Then with Asus ZenBook, you're gonna get this USB-C charger, which has a long cable. It's got all of this, probably the longest cable, which is good, but look at the size of this. This is a lot bigger than the MacBook Air. Then the M1 MacBook Air, you get a charger like that. So this is quite old one. This is only 30 watts USB-C, and it's this big. But now with Geekom, you get a charger like that. This is a 65 watt gallium nitride charger, USB-C, and it's absolutely tiny. Look at this. It's half the size of the 30 watts that Apple's done on M1 and double the power. It is less than half of the size of the 70 watt that Apple has in there, and pretty much the same power at 60 watt, and Asus doesn't even have a chance. Plus, the actual cable that comes with it, the USB-C cable, is really nice, braided, white, light USB-C cable that feels really, really high quality. So you're not just gonna get any random cheap cable like this Asus one in there. So now this is the time where we're gonna test the performance and put all of these side to side to see which one performs the best. So what I'm gonna open up is firstly hardware monitor, so we can actually see how well are these laptops holding up. So first test, what we have here is Cinebench R24. And what this test is the CPU part of these laptops. How good is it? We're gonna see how much power we're gonna pulling and all of this. Now, we're only gonna be doing the multi-core test in here because the single core test, I don't know who would be rendering on a single core. So I think measuring the multi-core rendering is a lot more accurate in what we're doing because that's what people and creators would actually be doing in here. Okay, are we ready? 3, 2, 1. So all of them are running the multi-core test. What I can see is the MacBook Air M3 is pulling about 20 watts of CPU power at first. This is from the get-go, but because the MacBook Airs are actually passive cooling, which means there's no active fan in them, they actually lose the performance quite a lot. So the M1 went from about 15, 16 watts, and it's already down at 10 watts. On the MacBook Air was 18 watts, we've lost a little bit, but on the M3, I'm running my actual thermal pad mod with the M3, which gives it a huge performance boost. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out my video so you can do that for yourself for just $10 and actually get a huge performance increase in there. As you can see, the M1 is almost half the power already going there. The Geekom one here, I can see that on the package power, the maximum we have pulled is 39 watts. And at this point, we are pulling about 26 watts. And because the PL1 and PL2 limits have been set to 45 and 35 watts, so we've pulled roughly about 40 watts. And then now we are about 26. We have thermally throttled a little bit there. Common thermal throttle has happened on the Intel one, but we'll see the scores. Now, on the Snapdragon laptop on this side now, we are pulling 6 watts at the moment, which is super, super low, and another 6 watt on the CPU cluster 1. So perhaps on all together, we're pulling around 11 watts. And I can see that the maximum we've pulled is 11 watts on both of them as well, which is very, very interesting. So the whole system is pulling about 19 watts on the Snapdragon. So we'll see who finishes first and what the scores are going to be on this multi-core then. Looks like Geekom laptop is the most ahead because it's got multiple threads. It's running that tile in there, whereas MacBook Air, maybe MacBook Air is actually slightly ahead now, we'll see. Now at this point, the M1 is pulling about 8 watts, which is literally half of the performance is left from what we were there at first. It's quite warm in there. The M3 is pulling 15 watts, so we have lost roughly around 25% of power. The Geekom is pulling still about 25%, which we've lost about 40% of power. And the ZenBook A14 is pulling around 4.5 to 5 watts on each cluster on both of them. So we have lost roughly around 50% of the power that we were pulling at first. Now this is necessarily to represent the whole power, but what that means is all of these laptops have some kind of boost at first and then it pulls it down as it gets hotter. So we'll see what the final scores are gonna be. Okay, we can see that the MacBook Air M3 has finished. 592 points. So this can take a rest and kind of have a rest on the battery. It's already cooling down. Okay, we have another 2 laptops actually that are finished here. The Geekom and ZenBook A14. While the M1 is finishing, there is an interesting other thing to mention. The battery capacity. On the Geekom, it is 70 to 72 watt hours. On the ZenBook A14, it's the same 70 watt hour battery. On the MacBook Air, it's only 50. And then the MacBook Air M3 is 66.5 watt hours. So even though being 15-inch, it actually has a smaller battery capacity compared to these guys here. So we'll see how the batteries are holding up later on in the video, so stick around for that. In terms of performance, looking at the results on just multi-core performance, the M3 is the best. We've got 592 points and then 545 points on the Geekom one, which is less than 10% slower. And then we've got 523 points on the Snapdragon one, which is very, very interesting as well. So the MacBook Air finally completed with 332 points, which is quite a bit lower than the rest of them here. So the multi-core performance, Geekom is right up there. Next, what we're going to be testing is Geekbench 6. Now, even though a lot of these are synthetic benchmarks, I'm absolutely loving them because they replicate real-world things that you would be doing with your PC. So it's very easy to have exactly the same test across the board, taking human error out and then really seeing which one is the best. Now, Geekbench tests the single and multi-core performance. So some of the things that you're doing are multi-core, which means that it can use different cores in your CPU and then do lots of things at the same time. Some of the things are single-threaded, which means that you can only use single core at the same time. Of the operating system and programs, when you're opening, closing things, are single core performance. So let's see which one is the best in here. Interesting, Intel is thermally throttling right now. The CPU package in here have gone up to 25 watts. Here, roughly around 18 watts. There, about 25. And here, probably the most, to 40 watts. M3 just finished. Geekom just finished. M1 just finished, which is interesting. And then finally, the ZenBook A14 just finished. So firstly, let's take a look at the single core performance. And interestingly, the single core performance is the best on M3, which Apple is always the best on single core. Then MacBook Air is slightly faster than the Geekom X14 Pro. And then we've got the ZenBook A14. So they're kind of lined up in there. But then multi-core score is slightly differently. The first one, the fastest, is Geekom. Geekom 10,788 compared to 10,423 on M3. Then we have the M1 and then finally the ZenBook with the ARM processor. So that's very interesting. Next up, we're gonna take some AI benchmark results. So we're gonna test the CPU first across the board. So go and go. M3 finished, M1 finished. Windows is still going. Wow. The Snapdragon finished before the Geekom, but at the same time, ooh, there's some interesting things happening here. So single precision score, and I'm not sure exactly if these are the same frameworks because we're using Onyx on the Windows and then Core ML on the Mac. We'll see if there's different ones as well. But in terms of the results, we can see single precision, best on M3, then M1, then Geekom, and then this one there. Then half precision, M3, then M1, then we've got the Snapdragon, then the Geekom. In terms of quantized, we have M3, then we've got the Geekom very, very close behind. Then we've got Snapdragon, and then we've got M1, which is very, very interesting. So let's do this again, but I'm gonna change this now to, okay, OpenVINO I can do here, but on the Snapdragon I can have only Onyx. So we'll just literally do them exactly again so that we're using the same battery capacity basically. M3 finished, M1 finished. Oh, I don't know if they finished so much at this. Oh no, there we go. It is loading up. Okay, now we've got some other interesting results. In terms of single precision, we've got the same kind of layout. M3, M1, Geekom, and then Asus. Then half precision, we've got the same. There. But now quantized scores, the interesting difference is that the Geekom is so much better. 6,500 compared to the second place, which is 5,600. And then we've got the ZenBook 5,100 and 4,430 on the M1. Let's move to the GPU. Let's see which one is the best in terms of GPU. They all have their own different architecture of GPU, so we'll see if that is even possible. I guess it is. So single precision, M3 winner, this second, Geekom third, this the last. Now half precision, interestingly, even though Geekom took the longest, is second place, 11,000 points. This Snapdragon, 15,000 points, is the highest. It's absolutely crazy. Then we've got 10,000 and then 6,000 in here. Quantized, 9,800 in there, which is the second last point. This is the last. So fourth place, third place. Then we've got second place here, quantized 7,000 points. And then Snapdragon, 37,000 points. Now, I'm not sure what QNN is. Is that the GPU or is that the MPU? I'm not exactly sure because it's got the MPU there as well. Well, let's move on. Next, we're gonna do our CPU rendering test. So we're gonna be opening Blender. The interesting thing here with the Intel is that while I'm waiting for these to download them, this is already completed. The CPU package power right now is 13.6 watts, which is quite high. And I wonder if I go to quiet mode, if that changes it. Oh yeah, quite a bit. To 4. To balance mode, yeah, so it goes down quite a bit. If you've got a performance mode enabled, it pushes quite a bit more power when it's on performance mode, which I've done so far. In fact, while this is downloading, what we'll do is we're gonna do an SSD test to see which has the fastest SSD, because that shouldn't affect the speeds in there. So go and go. Okay, SSD tests are done and the results are actually quite interesting. What we want to look at is the first and last line because they're the same. And you can see that both of the Windows laptops are on Gen 4 storage, high-end storage. We're getting almost 7,000 megabytes read speed and over 6,000 write speed, which is so much faster than the MacBook. But then looking at the random 4K, which is just reading very small files all over the place, in essence, we can see that the M1 is actually faster than the M3. Interestingly, in read and write speeds here, they're slightly faster than the M3. In terms of the read speeds, the Geekom is the lowest in the bunch here. And the ZenBook actually matches the read speeds here roughly with the M1, 72, 73 is roughly the same. And then write speeds, 153, ZenBook's the winner, Geekbench second, and then Apple roughly around the third. So whatever SSDs on the ZenBook is number one. Second, I'd give it to Geekom, then M1, and then M3, even though the SSD speeds aren't the same. 256 gigabytes, and then we have 512 on the M3. Now let's start the Blender CPU benchmark. In terms of CPU power, we can see we're pulling about 18 watts on the M3, about 8 watts on the M1, about 30 watts on the Geekom, and about 20 watts on the ZenBook. So quite a big difference actually. Okay, even though the M3 finished earlier, the results are not always the same. In terms of CPU, the ZenBook is the best. Suddenly the ARM performs the best. 85 points, then we've got 76 points, then 68, and then 57. Then Junk Shop, different scene. We can see again, ZenBook, 50 points, number one. This second, 48, then 44 on the M3, and then 3, which is complete destruction on the MacBook Air. And then finally, even the Classroom, again, the ZenBook with the ARM, 37.9, then 34, then 33, and then 22. So in here, CPU rendering test, the Snapdragon's the winner. Then Intel Core Ultra second, which is insane. Now, with Blender, we can actually test the GPU as well. So let's see how good is the GPU compared to the CPU in all of these. On Snapdragon, we can only go with the CPU. There's no GPU option. But here, let's try this now. Okay, GPU scores are in. Firstly, M1 fail because there's not enough VRAM or whatever in there, so it just fails. So that's last one. Then the ZenBook doesn't actually manage to do any of the GPU, so it's still the CPU, so third place. And then interestingly, between the Intel and Apple, Apple's just winning. 231 versus 448. That's almost half the scores on the Geekom compared to the Apple. But there's one more GPU test we can do, which is the Geekbench 6 OpenCL. So this is exactly the same test across the platform, but now on Apple, and then which is ARM as well. Then we have ARM Windows on Snapdragon, and then full x86 on Intel. So let's run these and see which one is the best. OpenCL, there we go. Ultimate GPU test now across. So then OpenCL, number one, M3, 32,000 points. Then Intel, 30,000 points, very, very close. Then M1, 20,000 points, 19.7. And then 9,300 on the ZenBook, very, very low. Now let's take a look at Speedometer 3.0 browser test. So now we're testing the browsing speed and how good the browser, is on all of these across. So let's take a look at the results. This massively tests the single core performance of the CPU. So we'll take a look. I started this the last, but this is 28.4, so I'm not sure what's going on. ZenBook, Finished later, 29.6. Let's take a look at these. Okay, M1 35, and then M3 surely it's got to be the highest. Okay, M3, number 1, then M1, then ZenBook, and then Geekom last with the browsing test. Very, very interesting though, because that was not the single core performance difference in all of them. Now, this is the time to reveal the actual battery results. So we've done equal amount of work on all of these machines across the board. Firstly, taking a look at the M3, we are at 71%. On M1, we are 75%. So interestingly, smaller battery, but because of probably less power as well, it's got more battery left. On Geekom X14 Pro, we have 51% of battery remaining. And then on the ZenBook, we have 81% battery remaining in there, which is absolutely crazy. This looks to be the best battery life across the board in here. Snapdragon and Windows on ARM is really doing something absolutely amazing. If I'm hovering over, this is 9 hours and 8 minutes left. The Geekom has 3 hours and 40 minutes left. And I don't know how much the MacBooks have left, but seriously impressive on the ZenBook. There's also something else to consider, which is the actual trackpad and the keyboard. Now, in terms of keyboard, they're all very, very good. MacBook Airs here have just a little bit more solid kind of feel to them. There's less keyboard flex and less travel, and it's just a little bit more harder. These are a little bit more softer. The ZenBook is even more softer. It's like you're typing on some kind of pad, and it's got a lot more chassis flex compared to this Geekbench in here. But I'd like to say that the best typing angle is actually on this MacBook Air M1 because it's slightly tilted upwards, whereas the M3 is just there and M1 is better like that. In terms of trackpad experience, number 1, the M3 is just the absolute best. Then I'd got to say that the M1 with their little trackpad. Then I'm gonna give it to the Asus ZenBook, and it's very nice. It's not haptic, it's still on a diving board, so it moves like that. And then the last place is this Geekom, and this is a huge downside for Geekom, and I really hope they're gonna change it somehow. Either put a proper diving board in here or put something else in, because the clicks, very, very weird. They've done such a great job in the rest of the laptop, but this is the number 1 way how you interact with the laptop, and this is a huge downside. I don't recommend this trackpad at all. It just feels on a whole other different lower level down, which is a bit of a shame. Now, let's talk about the price, because this puts it in a whole other very interesting category. You might be saying, I love macOS or hate macOS, I hate Windows on ARM. Whichever way you're gonna go for this, this is partly your consideration amongst the price. The M3, this MacBook, you can roughly pick up for $1,000, okay? This M1, you can get used somewhere refurbished roughly around $400, $500, something like that, which is quite a bit lower. Interestingly, the ZenBook A14, they were running a deal on Christmas and Black Friday where you could roughly pick this one up around $600, something like that, which is very, very good price as well, depending on the model you're going for this. This Geekom laptop here, $999, which is $1,000 for this. And I think you can get 5% off here, which gets you extra little bit off. But looking at these laptops, this Geekom is the most expensive. And in that price category, even though I'm getting 2 terabytes of SSD rather than 512 gigabytes and 32 gigabytes of RAM instead of 16, I feel like the 15-inch MacBook Air is better option. Unless you want 120 Hertz, which is very, very nice, and everything feels a lot more snappier on this screen, and I love that a lot more. And interacting with anything on it is a lot nicer. At the same time, I think overall usability, for example, the trackpad, this will drive you mad. Whereas on the MacBook, you're gonna love it. And for that price point, it's very hard to justify. Let me know which one you would go for. But there is one last thing to do, which is a teardown of this laptop. So let's see if we can look inside of this beautiful, beautiful Geekom X14 Pro. I mean, just look at this again for a minute. It truly is really, really good. Okay, I have finally got it open. And there's quite a bit of interesting taping happening. Firstly, there is a bit of a tape around here to make a really good seal around this bit so that it's pulling only the cool in from the top. And then they've sealed this side of the laptop as well. But when we're looking inside, it looks quite simple. You've got 2 speakers on this side. We've got one daughter motherboard in there. There's the cooling with a little bit of a heatsink in there. Nothing major. And then underneath here, underneath this here, we should be able to see the CPU and RAM that's over here. So we can see the CPU in there, and probably that CPU and RAM are on that side as well on the cooler. There's one heat pipe. Someone's gonna have to destroy this. I know they're saying that there's a heat pipe somewhere else in there, but there is just one heat pipe in here. Here we have the SSD. Let's see if we can see which SSD did they use. I think it's Crucial. Yep, Crucial P310, which is a bit of a lower end Gen 4 NVMe SSD. But interesting, they've tried to just cover it up for no particular reason, just to have no other brand in there, I guess. So when you're opening up, you just see Geekom. It's a branding thing in there, Crucial. The reason they haven't removed this is probably because of warranty reasons. If they need to warrant this and they see that this has been removed, then, you know, they can say to the customer, hey, you remove this. But look at the tiny motherboard in here. They've said that they've used magnesium alloy to actually build this laptop. Perhaps the magnesium alloy is somewhere inside, but right now I think this is just plastic. I mean, I could be wrong, but this feels like it's just plastic painted over, as you can see from the edges in there. So interesting. So what is the conclusion then in terms of the MacBook Air competition? Here's the thing. The performance and the actual playing field where we're competing is very, very rough. There is a lot of competition, but it's a very, very hard competition to win, especially if you're new to the market like Geekom. You don't have the tools, you don't have any of the other manufacturing set up like Apple has or like Asus or some of the other companies have, which means that you're just gonna have to spend a lot more in order to come out with a product. And Geekom have done a great job in here. I think this is a great laptop to get started. I think the looks, the ports, the performance, even battery life, and a lot of the things are absolutely amazing. I would say the biggest downside is the trackpad. If they can fix that or kind of change that, then honestly, it's a very solid competition because it's got great performance, a lot of the times very well beating this Asus ZenBook. It's nice to type on. You've got OLED screen, which is really, really nice to look at. But the price point, that's the bit that also catches you. For that price point, you can get a much more premium product and better experience. Not all the specs are the same, like 2 TB SSD in here compared to only 512 in there. But at the same time, I would personally buy more for the Apple storage because I would know how to get cheap Apple storage externally rather than this in here. So let me know what you guys think. If you agree, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks very much guys for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.